Hello, and welcome to our 7th episode of the China AI podcast, where we have AI conversations built in Africa and look to make AI practical, one conversation at a time. I'm your host, Stephen Gugu, and I'm super excited today that I'm joined by Karl Nchite, who I'm going to be introducing in a second. Karl was my teacher earlier this year on a course on AI in BC, which really made an impression. And I thought I should have him for this podcast once it starts. And I'm really happy that he's here with us. I'll introduce him in a second. This is our 7th episode. And in our 6th episode, we had Rawan Darie, the founder of Hakimu, which is an AI-powered legal intelligence platform that helps African legal systems to make legal services more accessible, legal information more accessible. So they work very closely with the Kenyan judiciary to help judges, to help lawyers, to be able to draft their opinions in this case, to be able to research much better, and doing some really amazing stuff. So if you want to listen to that podcast, please, you can find the link and you can follow that. We had a good conversation with her. Really spoke about AI for public good and her view around AI, how AI should be used to make justice delivery much more accessible, much cheaper, much faster. In this case, I really like that angle in this case. We also spent a bit of time just talking about AI hallucinations. And one of the key questions we spent with her was asking, how does she take, the typical LLMs that we're using and make them very suitable for the legal space where you cannot be having hallucinations. And so she had some really interesting ideas in terms of what you can do in this case when you're trying to really wrap around an AI model to make it give you the kind of results you're looking for. We spent a bit of time talking about how she prompts, and she mentioned that she always remembers to ask AI to tell her the truth and not only what she wants to hear. I also shared with her that one of the prompting techniques that I learned some time back was asking AI to take the persona of a Russian Cold War era general and just telling as it is. So I thought that would be an interesting conversation. And then we also spoke about AI and sovereignty for the continent, and really just talking about how the continent needs to come together, especially around the Africa continental free trade area, and really think about negotiating as a continent and not as individual countries. Because if you look at some of the big AI companies, they have a lot of leverage in this space. But if we come together as a continent, we can't be able to push for certain things that we need as a continent. So really, a really good conversation, really incisive conversation. So if you'd like to listen, please listen to that. Okay, so today we have Karl Nchite, and I'm really excited. So Karl is a co-founder and CEO of CatalyzU. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, CatalyzU. It's a Techstars-backed startup focused on workforce training and building Africa's technical startup talent pipeline. What I like about Karl, and as I mentioned, I attended a session which was facilitated by his company, CatalyzU, and he was one of the facilitators, is that he has a way of taking the AI hype that we all hear about, the AI noise, where you just sort of hear a lot about the potential about AI, but when you sit down, you don't know exactly what to do with it, and just making it extremely practical. So in that course, for instance, that we went through, I found that, along the VC value chain, it's also very clear spaces where you can apply AI and apply it in a productive kind of way, where you start generating some level of, return for whether you're a VC firm in this case. And he does this not only in the VC space. I think they do this across other countries, other sectors, and I think he'll speak about that in a second. So really excited to have him here. And that's why I decided to ask him to join us, because I think for you as a listener, you're looking for practical, tangible ways you can use AI in your company, not only searching for new recipes or summarizing emails and so forth, which you could always do, but also just to make sure that your company becomes more productive. So Karl, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. No pressure to make sure I live up to that description. I'll try and make it as practical for everyone here today.
Thank you. Have I done justice to your introduction? Do you want to add anything on the introduction in terms of what you do at Catalyze and maybe even your background?
You definitely have given or done it justice, but would be happy to start with a little bit of an intro, kind of give you the road that brought me here today to this podcast. My background is in finance. I've done majority of my studies in South Africa, and I have a finance background. Other than that, I've worked within the entrepreneurial space. I'm a product of two entrepreneurs as parents, and so straight after that, I worked within the I would say e-commerce and retail space to some degree. I had a business that was looking at barbershops and digitizing the barbershop ecosystem, whether it was payment rails, booking systems, inventory management. And we did that by largely going into these barbershops and offering them different products that we made, whether it was brushes, pomades, do-rags, bonnets, pillowcases, the likes in South Africa, and really gave me that initial feeling of what it takes to run a business, starting from grassroots to some degree. We scaled to give or take 40, 50 different barbershops. And it was a good segue for me into my next job, which was in the venture capital space. I worked at a Dutch VC that initially invested across India within the microfinance space, and then the subsequent funds. I believe today, probably the 4 or so operational funds across sub-Saharan Africa. They invested and they still do invest in a sector agnostic manner across, I would say, seed stage all the way to Series C. So I worked there for around 4 years, both on the investment team and then also as the head of impact, which gave me a lot of nice exposure to some of the best entrepreneurs on the continent, building some nice FaceTime with them, opportunity to sit in on some of their board meetings. So it was a pleasure of an experience. And, you know, when you have a background or an upbringing with people that are entrepreneurs, it usually results in you having that itch. And I'd scratched that itch. Unfortunately, the first scratch didn't turn out too successfully. And so I got the second itch. I actually don't think the itch ever goes away, right? It's always there, maybe dormant, but it came back alive towards the third year of my career at Goodwill, the venture capital fund. And myself and my co-founder, a guy by the name of Luke Mustard, started iterating on an idea. And as with many different ideas or many different businesses, it took a few different turns. And that's what led me to CatalyzU. CatalyzU is we see ourselves as a future of work or a enterprise ed tech business. We are a workforce intelligence or workforce training and intelligence platform. So we go into large businesses and we help them understand their workforce. We do this by first diagnosing and assessing the skills that their workforce has, the skill gaps that they have, probably more of a focus on the skill gaps that they have. We do this through a proprietary method. And from there, we take those skill gaps and we create training material, training curricula for that workforce. We leverage their existing standard operating procedures, product catalogs, old training material to kind of create these bite-sized training modules that we disseminate via WhatsApp. So it's hyper contextualized training that's disseminated via WhatsApp. And I think where we really wrap everything up is we're not just focused on training for the sake of training, but we're focused on training to improve business performance. So what we're trying to do is identify for different jobs and job roles that you have within your company, what are the core KPIs that you're focused on and which skill competencies help act as levers for those business KPIs. So our hypothesis is that we will be able to improve your business performance. And we walk a long journey, a continuous journey, as is with training and the need for it with our clients. And so that's what CatalyzU is today. My journey with you, Stefan, was slightly different. It's where our roots have come from, running a lot of training programs across various sectors. As you mentioned, one of those sectors was sales, others entrepreneurship, and then as you did within the venture capital space. And I believe the program you went through was a AI in venture capital. And so yeah, VC has been a very big focus for us, given my background and that of my co-founder. I think the central theme there, just to wrap it up here for you, is training. And that's what we're looking to do as we move forward, just training on a B2B lens and training these large distributed workforces.
Yeah. Wow. That's quite a journey, first of all, from, serving barbershops to a VC farm, sort of like now, the training side. That's quite a ride. And I'm glad to hear that once the itch is there, it sticks with you. I try to think about my entrepreneurship journey and I wonder whether my parents were not entrepreneurs. So I really need to ask myself where I got that from. But it's interesting to see how that your itch at least has always been there because, you learned firsthand, how to be an entrepreneur. But then I also really liked what you just mentioned in terms of how you sort of like thinking about the future of work, right? Because for me, that's a big theme around where we are today. with AI and everything. There's a big theme around what will work look like in the future, what skills do people need to have, and so forth. But before I get to that, I just want to maybe go back to what you do at Catalyze, you and just understand one thing. So if you're walking into a corporate today, do you already have sort of like pre-designed courses for them, or do you walk in and say, hey, you know what, we'll understand what you guys do over the next month or whatever it is, then we'll design exactly what you need, very bespoke in this case, or how do you do that? Because that's very interesting. And then I'm going to go to the next question, which is going to be like, how do you do that? Because we're just doing training with already pre-existing content is difficult. Having to design content and then sort of like offer it.
Yeah. So it's actually a blend of those two. We've kind of fine-tuned models on specific domains, if you will, and built some, I think, an easy way to put this, built sectoral textbooks, if you will. Not really, but that's effectively what we've done. And so that gives us a baseline understanding of a specific sector. And then when we walk into a corporate client, and this can be, we believe our training is agnostic, but right now we have a high focus on businesses and sectors with large workforces that are typically distributed. So you can think of retail, you can think of hospitality, restaurants, catering, a host of other sectors as well. I think that the BPO space, the business process outsourcing space, is also one that's very interesting. And when we walk into one of these businesses, the first thing that we're trying to do is understand the business and how it operates, try and understand the different standard operating procedures that they currently have, and probably most importantly, understand the different jobs and job roles, job descriptions that they have within that business. That gives us an understanding of what are we dealing with today, and then we begin a process. We call it talent skill abstraction, where we actually look at the skill sets of the existing workforce in a few different ways. And from that, we're able to begin to assess where the skill of the existing workforce in the respective roles are, start to figure out what kind of training is needed for this workforce. That then takes us back to taking our baseline textbook, if you will, and starting to contextualize it with how this business actually operates, the product catalog, the kind of specific qualities and ways of working that a business has. And that allows us to create these bite-sized curricula. Or the curriculum isn't bite-sized, but the actual training, the lessons is bite-sized because of how we disseminate it. But I think that the message got across.
Yeah. No, wow, that's really good. And I have to say that I think this is what we need much more of, because I know there's lots of trainers who walk into a corporate and they have, their content. I mean, they'll do a needs assessment, and so the level of customization is probably 10% or something, because they already know what they're gonna say. Even the needs assessment is really just to. But for you, what you're saying, when you go back and look at everything you have and say, okay, how do we sort of like deliver these in a way that, first of all, engagement goes high, content is very customized, and so forth. So, that's amazing. And just coming then to the AI talk, because when I see you, I see AI, but you've not mentioned the terminology AI so far. How does AI fit into all these? Like, how do you use AI in all this just to make sure that, you're delivering the right content? And maybe also just to ask the question from this perspective of, if you're doing the same thing without AI, how difficult, easy would it be? I'm just curious just to get a sense of how you're using AI for productivity.
Look, I lean on the cautious side when it comes to throwing AI into everything, at least when I describe things. But AI sits at every single stage of the journey. When we are creating the textbook, if you will, there's a process of fine tuning where we take a baseline model and we basically throw a host of information within a specific sector at it to kind of adjust that model's understanding and kind of make it hyper specific to a specific sector. And I think that's where we move in the future, right? I think that we'll stop relying on huge models with these tens, if not hundreds of billion parameter models, and start moving to smaller, more sector specific models. That's just a general perspective on the ecosystem. From there is a whole bunch of contextualization that we do. We're leveraging AI to do that in a few different ways. We've developed a hierarchical topic modeling system, leveraging predominantly LLMs. And now I'm probably taking this out of the practical.
No, it's okay.
But effectively what we're doing there is we're using this system to kind of identify the foundational concepts in any specific job role and break those foundational concepts to actual daily activities that and methods for operations. So there's a process that we go through to actually do that. And that allows us to get to those bite-sized lessons that I keep speaking about, right? Where you're actually targeting a specific skill or quality in your workforce, in an employee, in a person that you want to come out and shine. Then I would say we use an orchestration platform called LangGraph. They basically allow us to wire a whole host of different things together. So that might be us wiring together our various databases to WhatsApp. Those databases can be the databases that control and hold all of our content and context, or let me say content first with regards to what we're disseminating, and then context with regards to, I think a very important thing in how we operate is we build profiles on each and every single one of your employees. So, now you're getting training that's not just for Victoria Ventures, but you're getting training for the principals. So for Stephen at Victoria Ventures, you're getting training specifically for the associates, the analysts. So everyone is getting training that's hyper tailored to them. Using a VC with, 10 to 30 different employees is probably not the best example. But if I use another one of our customers in Safaricom, maybe it's their entire business development unit that is getting training that's hyper specific to each and every single layer within the sales team, the enterprise sales team. And that allows that's one of the things that we use AI for, to kind of score each lesson and contextualize it in a database that then allows us to tailor the training.
Yeah, yeah. And I must say, I went through that because I went through your course, and it was the first time, I got the bite-sized lessons, and I found them to be very useful in terms of just priming me for the next session, just to know what's going to be covered, and also just making sure that I went through the assignments, because I didn't like sort of getting 0% on this question, and so I really had to do some work before that. So I like that about that training. I think it's increase engagement. I didn't just show up for the training. I spent a bit of time. So I like that idea of customization and so forth. And so let me just take you in a different domain just for a second. One of the things I've been struggling with, 4 kids, my four daughters, and they go to a school. And, I look at how I work every day and how much I use AI and what AI, and I ask myself what kind of skills my kids need to have when they are sort of like, working in this space, next 10 years, 15 years. I don't even know how the world is going to be looking in this case. Then I go back and look at how content is being delivered in school. And I'm just like, there's something wrong. I'm just like I don't know what the answer is, but I know this is not the answer. So I don't know, when you think about just learning, just in our schools on a day-to-day basis, and just the way education has remained very stagnant in terms of, any innovation and so forth. Like, what's your thought in terms of what do we need to do? Like, are we training people for the new, work environment where AI is going to be a core worker with us? Or what are we doing?
Yeah, I completely agree with you from the lens of education being so stagnant and kind of trailing behind, especially when you look at a lot of the advancements that we're having in other sectors, medicine, biology, finance now. Even when we look at education, it feels like we're really trailing behind. I think this logic of working towards a certification, a degree, an end goal is probably going to be done away with, and there'll be a lot less emphasis on that. I think that there's probably skills that we have to start working towards more, right? One of those skills which you kind of touched on now is this skill of continuous learning. If you think about the pace at which things are changing with these tools that are now all around us, we're going to have to keep learning at similar pace to keep up with them, right? And I think that's probably the biggest thing for your children, to get comfortable being in that uncertain space, in that space of not knowing, and kind of constantly upskilling oneself. Yeah.
No, indeed, it's one of the key things I'm really trying to sort of like cultivate, even in myself and in my team. We're trying to sort of like say, we have to keep learning, right? You have to have sort of like, for me, it's my Saturday mornings. I wake up at 5 in the morning and I want to put in 2 hours, which is just on learning, right?
Yes.
When I find a difficult concept, and especially with AI nowadays, you can just drop something there, explain as if I'm a 5-year-old, and it will break it down, whatever it is, sort of like the simplest way. And then you can sort of like, now let's move to the 10-year version and so forth. But then you mentioned something which I thought was really interesting. I want to just double click on that, which was this idea of what skills do we need to be having, in this new age that you're talking about? Like when you're going into jobs, you're going to companies today, right? I mean, the basic one is just to say people need to be able to use AI. But, at some point, using AI is going to be like using the internet, right? Everyone can use the internet. But then behind that, what kind of skills do you think, apart from this idea of continuous learning, do you see people needing to have in the new space we're moving towards?
I feel like this is a bit of a loaded question, but it is. Skills are hyper specific to the role that needs to be completed, right? I think the reason I went with something so generalized and agnostic as continuous learning is because it cuts across multiple domains. If we think about the skills specifically, I would say this need for coding skills is decreasing at an alarming rate, right? And I think it's interesting that has been the case. I think we will move to, and I think that the reason that is because of the material that is, all of these coding languages are so structured and well documented. And if you think about all of these models, that's the kind of knowledge and context that they need in order to be trained on. And so that's why they've managed to absorb that space, the coding space, these various languages, whether it's React or Python, whatever it is, so quickly. Now, if we think about what is challenging for them to understand, that's all of our softer qualities, right? Empathy to a large degree, this intangible kind of connection of speaking to someone, understanding what they're feeling by reading their facial expressions, all of these things. I think these interpersonal skills, very important, and they're only going to become more important. World views and being able to absorb or being able to pull on multiple different perspectives at once, I think that will be very important. Yeah, I think I would focus in on the intangible, softer skills. I think that becomes really, 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 really important. How to engage, because a lot of the other stuff is going to be done for you.
Yeah, and I like what you're saying. This idea of that just interpersonal skills, how to engage. Because at the end of the day, the models are not gotten there yet. I don't know, because they're improving at such a fast rate that you don't know where they're going to be in a couple of years. But let me just be more specific with the question. And I asked a physics question, and thank you for allowing me there. So you go into organizations, and you're really looking to improve the productivity, right? At the end of the day, I think the KPI for the client is basically this guy was doing 5 reports, maybe they're doing more reports, or maybe the level of accuracy has improved, so the number of errors have reduced and so forth. Do you maybe also offer sort of like proper just AI training in terms of just how to use it? Because, at the end of the day, we're in this space where AI is going to be one of the tools that any employer out there should be thinking about in terms of improving productivity. And here's a question now. With AI, we need to develop new skills, right?
Yes.
Because how we used to work is not going to be the same. So I'm just curious, what are those new ways of working that we need to, new attitudes towards work that we need to be having? I mentioned to you the article I was talking about how the future of work would look like by, I think, David Brooks in the Atlantic. And you're saying about this idea that AI can make you very lazy, right? Because you can just be asking it, tells you stuff, and you just paste it. But over a period of time, and he says he has a lot of data in that article where he says that people who were tested, using AI and then not using AI immediately after, when they were not given the AI tool to work with them, their productivity went significantly lower, which meant that their cognitive abilities reduced to a certain extent. And so you keep doing this over a period of time without not knowing how to use AI properly to just improve your cognitive abilities. I don't know, in a couple of years, he made this interesting article. Sorry, interesting quote. I don't know if you've had this quote, which is that maybe AI will get to artificial general intelligence, not because it's so good, but just because we want to become dumber over a period of time, which I found hilarious. But now coming back to the question. So when you're doing the training, how are you ensuring that people still retain the additional skills they need to work with AI, and they still retain this mental attitude that they need to keep pushing things?
Maybe I'll come to your question now. This concept of cognitive decline, I think that they're seeing it heavily within the education system, right? Given the fact that the education system hasn't evolved, people are just utilizing these models to do their assignments, to do their homework, to do their this. And we're not challenged, we haven't changed the method for assessments. So, you're in a space where it's so easy to just be lazy, and you come into the real world and you're shocked, right? So I think that our youth has an uphill journey in terms of adapting to the working environment. And from that lens, I think that the need for these vocational training programs and training systems becomes even more important. To your question, do we run training specifically on AI? We have run training on AI, and we do, like I said, the training that we do is agnostic. We can train in any space, any vertical. How would we ensure that training is sticky, right? So like there's some kind of retention that actually sticks post the program. And there's a few different ways. I think maybe just quickly on the theoretical side, there's something called the forgetting curve, which basically looks graph over here, and on the x-axis is time, and on the y-axis is knowledge, let's say, whether it's knowledge retention or just knowledge. As time goes, that curve goes down, right? And how you stop that is you have spaced repetitions where you're challenged with that specific context frequently, right? So that's how you ensure that things are sticky, whether that is through continuous training that is coming at you via WhatsApp. I think you got to experience a little bit of a small taste of those small nuggets that come at you. If those small nuggets are hyper specific to your understanding, what your current, I would say, skill level or competence for a bit of a rough term is, we can tailor it to that. I think more importantly and specifically to AI, it's really around systems and workflows, right? Like if you want to be utilizing AI effectively, it's about context, right? So it really isn't about chatting and saying, hey, this is what I want to work on today. That is the current method for inputs is one of the most ineffective systems, right? It's just the easiest and fastest entry into engaging with these large language models. We've gone from typing, we've now shifted over to voice. So these startups like a Whisperflow, and the likes have now come out, and what they're allowing is you to talk instead and engage with the model. So you're doing it faster. Meta has just come out with, I think it's called Brain to QWERTY or something like that, a model that understands your brainwaves. So you're not actually speaking, you're thinking. And it's getting this. Neuralink has been working on this for quite some time. We're getting further and further to a point where you can manage to engage with these models faster. I digress. So how do you manage to engage with these AI models? It's about building systems, right? Whether it's a system and a loop, a workflow for your emails being reviewed, that's the most important thing. How do I build that system? How do I augment, adjust, iterate on this system? And how do I ensure that I'm constantly utilizing it? That's how you make sure that the things that people are learning sticks. You make it very applicable to them, to the job that they have to do on a daily basis, so that they actually find utility in these things. I took you on a journey answering. I hope it was.
You did. I don't know where to take the next question, because I want to follow the journey, and I also want to come back. But let me just follow the journey just for a second, because you've mentioned sort of like how everybody's trying to, and maybe that's not the terminology used, but to me it looks like reduce friction, right? We're reducing friction in terms of reduce friction.
Yes.
Now we don't type anymore. Now let's speak about it. Let's have the brainwaves. I don't know whether we're going to be hearing something and then sort of like it just translates and so forth. I mean, I'm a very I'm an old school kind of person who I believe in writing down. And when I write down, it's like I feel like there's a process that my brain goes through in terms of just formulating something. And when I look at it, I'm just like, okay, that makes sense to a certain extent. And at times I feel like my first level thoughts, if you want to call it that, are the ones I just speak out. My second level thoughts are the ones that I sit down and write because I have to sort of like conceptualize what I want to do. Then I have to force my hand to write and everything. I guess that's why my question was even going, the first question I was asking about, which is like, how do we engage with these systems? Like, what new skills do we need to develop in terms of how engaging with these systems? Because definitely, if things are moving towards that direction and we still want to retain the same level of depth we've always had, and there has to be something that we need to do because the systems are going to keep improving. The companies are going to keep on churning more and more tools to make it easy to reduce the friction and everything. And we can't still use those things the same way we've been using them. I
You
don't know
know,
whether there's an answer to this question. I'm just curious
I,
about your thoughts.
I think that it comes down to ways of working, right? Each company has their own way of working, and they can try and embed that in their employees. I think each person has their own way of working, right? So, if we kind of walk through the sequence that you mentioned, step one is speaking out. Maybe it's conversationally having a debate with a peer at work, and then from there it's taking all of those thoughts and writing it down into a structured thesis or argument or viewpoint, and then from there it's plugging it in. I think that the goal is to be able, unfortunately, things have a tendency of moving towards how can we productize this workflow? How can we make it more efficient, faster, increase productivity? If that's the case, what happens is you start trying to cut out unnecessary steps. I think, to your point, those first two steps are extremely important because AI can take you in a plethora of different directions. I think what I see with these models, especially these newer, really like chain of thought based models that, and I put inverted commas here for the listeners, that are thinking, you can almost think of it in two ways. Some people say that it's better now with these newer models to give an end goal and not to constrain a model in terms of how to get there and just let it get there. Other people believe that, and I think there's space for both of these, that you want to kind of guide what your goal is, what you think should be done or what the contents are, and then let the model do its work. So prompts are becoming more and more or less and less constrained. So I think that's a nice evolution. I don't think that you cut out, or I don't think that there's any right or wrong answer to your question, right? If your way of working is to speak and to write, then that should still happen. I think that it's, I don't know, being in the venture space, you might find this interesting. A16Z, maybe like towards the either the tail end of last year or the beginning of this year, removed a lot of the keyboards within their offices, and they inputted I think it was like a foot-based microphone. So people working there could just push to speak, and that's how they're engaging because they're thinking, they're talking, and these systems, they're very good at even picking. If you haven't used Whisperflow, you can whisper into it effectively, and that's how you're doing you're communicating, right? Or you're engaging with your initial thoughts, and from there, the writing step has been done for you. You now refine that writing step, and then off you go and to the races. Is that better than just writing? I don't know, right? And I think there's actually a lot of research that showcases that it's better to write for stronger retention, and I think that mind muscle connection happens a lot better with writing. Something I should do more of, I think.
I'm seeing your Converti or Whisperflow. You're probably using that every single day. I am going
Whether
to
it's
try it. I'm not.
Whisperflow or just his voice,
Yes. The voice notes. Yeah. No, I also use them. Just that, different use cases. But I want to touch on something before we start wrapping up because I'm seeing we're already jumping to the, or to the end of the podcast. And I wish we had much more time to go much deeper. I like talking to you because you have sort of like very interesting views on different things. So I'm learning a lot also. So I just to ask you, so one of the key things that I say that I really liked about you and about the course that we attended earlier is I felt like you and this way of taking the AI potential, if you want to call it that, and just breaking it down and sort of like for people to be able to sort of like just understand this is how you can use it in this case. Certainly the course that you had was very practical from that perspective. So I want to ask a general question and feel free to take it whichever direction. So, for companies, because we have C-suite people listening to this podcast. And one of the key questions is always like, I hear everything, but I'm just wondering, how do I figure out where to apply AI? Like, I hear all the tools. I know my team is using it to do productive things here and there, but maybe there's no proper sequencing, which then ensures that the final product, if the productivity is up 50% or whatever the figure might be in this case. So how does someone think about that as a problem? How do you think about that when you're thinking about organization deciding courses?
I think for all of your listeners, I would say the most important thing within this space is context. And you want to create as many funnels or pipelines into a centralized area that has as much context as possible. So if that is having access to people's calendars, having access to the meetings that people are participating in, and the meeting minutes, the transcriptions, the summaries from said meetings in one place, having access to the conversations that are happening on your various messaging platforms, whether that's Slack, Teams, or WhatsApp, having access to all of those, access to all of the output that actually is created, the standard operating procedures. The more context you have, the better any of these artificial intelligence tools, the better the job that they can do is. And so I would heavily focus on trying to structure the knowledge that I have within my business, the various informational flows into one kind of aggregated space. It can be multiple different places. I think that, I don't agree with this statement, but people are saying it's the death of SaaS. You have all of these different SaaS tools. I think what you want to figure out how to do is centralize the information that's gathered from these tools into one place and allow for some kind of rating system, agentic operating system to have access to it and to support with decisions. I think that setting up that knowledge architecture is probably step one, and then choosing different verticals within it is step two. So figuring out how to maybe utilize an agentic system that helps with all of your financing decisions. So there's a weekly budget that is reviewed where we look at the spending that has gone on within the company and the different revenue streams, etc. That is a practical space that you can really already see an uplift. Yeah, that's what I would say. I think that there's a nice way of thinking about it, right? You've talked a lot about productivity. I think where AI almost takes us is not just focusing on productivity, but also capabilities, right? So you now have access to almost any capability, but you have to give this AI context to utilize or to actually do its job within the plethora of different capabilities that you now have, and at a fraction of a cost.
Yeah. I like that final wrap in terms of capability in this case. And just realizing there's this statement I read that the cost of not having an AI coworker will only increase over time.
Yes.
Because it's like you have these capabilities that you mentioned in almost any field, and you're not using it, everybody else is using it. So it's gonna, just compound over a period of time. So, and especially, we didn't get enough time to do this, but I wish we'd have spent a bit more time on the guys who are joining the workforce. We'll leave that for the next conversation because we do need to wrap up. But we usually have some signature questions that all guests have to answer. And I want to run those by you just to hear what your thoughts are going to be. So the first one is, what's one AI habit that you practice helps you save a lot of time, daily, weekly?
So we have an operating system that we've built on Notion, which basically it's structured in the format of OKRs, so objectives and key results. Below our key results, we have projects, and then we have tasks. And so everyone on the team should be very diligent with inputting all of their tasks. And so we operate on a sprint basis of 2 weeks. And so every kickoff of the sprint, we've put in all of the tasks and the projects that we're working on and how those relate to our different key results for that quarter. Now, for me, as we're going through a period of 2 weeks, whether it's in the tech team or just the I guess, a non-tech team, it can be challenging to keep up with the entire team. And so what we've built internally is a Slack bot that looks at everyone's different tasks, all of the projects that are being worked on. And on a daily cadence, it will update me on what has been worked on by each employee. They engage with it via Slack. So every single day they say which tasks they've actually worked on, what was completed, etc. And then I get a report at the end of the day, and I can kick off my day with this report, and just gives me context going into the next day. And I think constantly having that context, knowing who actually needs a conversation, who needs some support, where there are blockers, I think that helps me a lot. And maybe more than anything, gives me comfort that work is actually being done. So I think that's very useful for me.
Pretty cool. I like that, how we go around building something there, but I really like that because of how it also helps you to connect with different employees.
Yes.
Maybe not directly, but at least you know who to speak to because someone has a blocker somewhere and maybe they've not reached out to you and you can sort of just say, okay, I've seen where you're at, so we need to move this. So, okay, nice. Interesting. Secondly, what's one AI underrated breakthrough we should all be knowing or talking about from your perspective?
So I spoke a little bit about context earlier. I think what's been nice if you think back to when you just started using any of these LLMs, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude, your context window was so small. It's gotten larger and larger. But what typically happens if you engage with the chat for a long period of time is either it has to summarize the conversation and create a new markdown file for it to use as memory, or it tells you, hey, this chat is getting too big, move on to another chat. What's been very topical over the last few months is people figuring out how to create a memory for their various chats with an LLM. So right now, what's very popular is people using a tool called Obsidian, which is a really cool tool. It started off as a note-taking tool for me way back when it lost the battle against Notion, but I've started utilizing it now as well. In addition to Notion, I haven't let go of my trusted old friend. But why people use Obsidian is because the architecture is on markdown files. And so you can connect Obsidian to your Claude code being Claude in general. And when you're engaging with it, it has context of all of the different conversations that you've ever had, can have context of your entire business. And that is just being stored via Obsidian, via these MD files, these markdown files. And I think that in itself is something that isn't talked about enough. Retrieval mechanisms. How do we make sure that these AIs have context of the things that we needed to have context of? And that's retrieval. I think that's a very easy way of using advanced.
Nice. I mean, I have checked out Obsidian. I've not yet created the markdown files and so forth. I'm not that advanced yet, but I can imagine how that can be useful. So if there's one thing I'm going to remember in this episode 4 is context. Right? You really hammered on that point. Context.
I think it's an important one.
Yeah, I know it is. Yeah.
And maybe get the AI to set up the structure for your markdown files. You don't have to do it.
Yeah. No. I was watching a video earlier today, or someone was talking about the same thing about context. There's a podcast I listened to, and they're just talking about the same thing. So, like, just to create context about who you are, how you like to speak, what are you working on, etc., and how that helps you in terms of subsequent conversation. Just to sort of just start off and just move on. You don't have to always introduce yourself and say hi, chat, etc. Yeah. Okay. Last question before we wrap up, which is if you had unlimited AI resources, what would you solve?
I think it would be wrong for me not to make this or to hone in on the educational space from a position of upskillment.
I feel like pushing you out of education. I'm curious, something else out there that just like, I wonder. You can start with education, then maybe let's hear the other bit also. I'm curious.
Okay, so if I were to say education, I think it levels the playing field, right? I think AI really levels the playing field to a large degree from a sense of access to knowledge, etc. I think that, look, it's very exciting that the space between idea and business or idea and operationalizing that idea is decreasing at such a rapid pace. And so I think that I would dive deeper into that, and I would try and put that access into everyone's hands. I feel like I've let you down on this last one, but
No, you
I'll leave
haven't.
it.
No, no, Carl. The point you're making is such an important one, and I say that because one, first of all, there's people who are not aware that just moving from idea to execution. There's people who are still lost in. We need 3 months, right? We need to, I don't
Yes.
know, need to have 10 meetings, etc., and they just don't roll these off. So like the next day. I think for me, that's one that people need to be thinking about that. And I'm just curious if we're able to do that. Like, I think it's such an important thing. And I'm not thought about it from that perspective. If you're able to do that, I just wonder how many more problems we could solve, right? Like,
So
I
many,
don't know.
but then the next problem is like the age old thing, right? Like execution is a huge thing. What is crucial for execution? I think in the VC space, everything is about network. Not everything. A lot is about network. Those things start to become ever more important. So then now we have all of these other barriers that are kind of repositioned and have come up. So I think that there's a lot of questions and unanswered things that still come up, even though the playing field has been leveled from an access to knowledge standpoint. But yeah, I think there's a whole world to explore there. And
Yeah.
I could probably go on and chat with you for another hour on it. But I do that today.
Wow, Carl, thank you so much. That's been awesome. I'm happy that we had this conversation, and I'm happy that we really gotten into, discussing context, the future of learning, the future of work, just this idea of idea to sort of like execution and sort of like what can be done around that. I don't know whether you have any closing thoughts, maybe one thought or something that you want to put out, or
Context is crucial, Stephen.
I should have known that. I should have known it was going to be about context. I know it's like, I have to say, in the morning, and I'm not kidding, I was watching a video about context. So it's amazing that you brought it up again. And I hope everybody just takes these and just sort of like takes a few steps. And I think I'll share the video that I watched earlier, which
Please.
was just about sort of like these markdown files and everything, so that everybody can just create a better context for the whatever LLM tool they're using, which then helps them to be able to get better results and move much faster. So thank you very much, Carl, for joining us. We really appreciate. This has been China AI, episode number 7 with Karl Nchite, where we have practical conversations about AI grounded in Africa and look to make AI practical, one conversation at a time. If you want to follow us, please follow the podcast. If you have someone who you think should be listening to this episode, share with them. In this case, please suggest guests that you want us to host in the next conversations. Thank you very much, and see you in the next episode.